Good evening. I am delighted to be with you all this evening. Thank you for inviting me to paradise. Who here knows the number one fear in America?
Public speaking.
You are exactly right. You get a book. Actually, public speaking is the number one fear in America. Number 2 is heights, then bugs, then spiders, and number 5 is death. Most of you in this room would rather die than stand next to me here at this podium. In fact, when I do media training, I do a lot of podium etiquette. I have to tell you my favorite podium failure. Do you all remember the former mayor of Washington, D.C., Marion Barry? His famous quote standing at a podium was, "Outside of the murders, we have the lowest crime rate in the nation." Well, what I want you to know is that if you would like somebody to stand at a podium or perhaps post on Facebook or want somebody to attend a meeting for you to where they can talk about your brand, they can support your culture, then you need to develop champions. And these champions are what I want to talk about this evening. You know, it's no longer now good enough to just have a good product and good customer service. That's not enough in this environment. What you need to think about is how can you integrate all of your communication tools, including advocacy, in order to promote your product and service. You now have got to layer that on to every other thing you're doing because your competition is stronger and brighter and more strategic than it's ever been. So let me share with you what advocacy is for me. It's recruiting and engaging champions, and I'll call them champions or advocates tonight. Those are people willing to use their voice and their influence to support your issue or your brand. How do you use and recruit champions in order to get them to support you? Now, advocacy has been used in the public affairs arena for decades. We would gather up people who were passionate about something, and we'd say, okay, now let's go kill a bill or let's go pass a bill. Well, now what we need and know is that the same sort of energy that these people bring to an issue can be brought to your company. And what we want is for you to engage them, because when they talk about your company, they have more influence in buying decisions than you have in trying to sell your product and service. So let me give you an example. Let's say Kellogg's. So Kellogg's decides we're going to have an advertising campaign to sell cereal. We want you to buy cereal. They also want to do an advocacy campaign because what they want is to be seen perhaps as a leader in dealing with hunger in America. And so what they have found is that if they can find other people who are interested in solving the hunger in America problem, then they begin this two-way conversation with them. And once they develop that relationship, they become a champion for Kellogg. And if you're a champion of Kellogg, you want to buy their cereal. But here's the cool thing about advocacy, is that you now tell your friends and family, I buy their cereal, I want you to buy their cereal, and thus the cost per sale is minimal. So you have third-party people telling others to buy your product and service. And that's the power that we have to look at now. You know, I work with a lot of startup businesses, and I work with Fortune 500 companies, and what I say to them is, in this environment, everybody's a startup company. Because what a startup has to think is, how can I be most strategic with the limited resources that I have and I've got to stretch my marketing as wide as possible. And to do that, I got to get as many people on board to promote my product and service as I can, whether you're a startup or a Fortune 500 company. So let me tell you my belief. My belief is friends don't let friends PowerPoint. So we're not showing a PowerPoint tonight. But I would like you to write down one word. Write down the word why. W-H-Y. Write down the word why. Because in this climate that we are in the 21st century, people have to know why they should want to support you, your issue. Why should they want to buy your product or service? Why should they want to invest in your company? Why should they become your champion? They don't need to know lots of facts and figures. They want to know why they personally should get involved. It's about me, not about you, but you influence why I should care about you. So engaging these passionate, loyalist people, champions, they bring more credibility, they bring more influence to do what the dean said, to increase revenue. I'm a business person. I love entrepreneurs, but let me tell you, I'm all about making revenue. How can you make more revenue? How can you have a better market share? How can you go and expand your product without adding additional significant cost to it? So let me share with you a story. True story. There was this young man several years ago, and he was on vacation in Buenos Aires, and he was sitting at the bar, and this woman is sitting next to him, and they start talking over the tequilas they were drinking. And he said, well, what do you do? And she says, well, I run this not-for-profit organization that gives out shoes to people that can't afford it. And at one point he says, well, I have nothing else to do this afternoon. Can I come with you? And she said, come on down. So they went into one of the barrios of this very, very poor neighborhood in Buenos Aires. And she handed him a pair of shoes that he handed to a 9-year-old boy, and a second pair of shoes to an 11-year-old. And the mother of these two children come out, and the mother is crying, and he thought, that is very odd. And she says, no, thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you know that my sons can only go to school every other day because the school requires that you wear shoes, and we only own one pair? My children have never owned their own pair of shoes. So he leaves Buenos Aires after quite a few more tequilas and goes back to California, and he decides, I'm going to raise money to buy 250 pairs of shoes and take them back down there. And then all of a sudden he thinks, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to manufacture shoes, and for every pair of shoes sold, I'm going to give a pair of shoes away to a child in need in a third world country. And by the way, I'm going to have a third world country manufacture the shoes, so I'm creating jobs. Now, this person's name is Blake Makowski, and he's the CEO of Tom's, T-O-M-S. I see heads nodding. Have you bought Tom's shoes? Maybe. All right, from this idea, this man is now the CEO of a company that's worth more than $70 million. And it took 12 years before he placed his first advertisement. What he did was have people buy into his why I should buy a pair of your shoes. And they told their family and friends, and those people all started buying shoes. And now he is a multi-millionaire with a passion for other products that are needed in third world countries. So what I want you to know is that if people understand why, they'll support you. And they'll support you, and you don't have to offer a discount to it, because people are bought in that it's worth their investment of time and dollars. So champions for you, which is what we want, have the ability to influence with their voice to support your brand. Now here's the deal. You got to have a good brand, right? Nobody wants to become a champion of a bad brand. So I recommend to businesses that every 12 to 18 months you do a brand assessment. A brand assessment. Now, for those of you in here that have money, please hire me. For those of you here have no money, I'm going to tell you how to do it on the cheap, okay? A brand is not about a logo. A brand is how you feel about a product and service. And this is how you can do your brand assessment. What is the first word that comes to mind when someone says the name of your company, your service, or your product? So if I say Walmart, you say cheap. You know what? Walmart's very happy with that. They embrace that brand. They want to be a low-cost, high-volume carrier, right? It's okay. Call us cheap. If I say Mercedes-Benz, you say luxury. That's what they want. They want to be seen up there. If I say the University of West Florida, you say awesome. Of course, that's what I heard you say. So what I want is that you understand you have to have a good brand for people to want to champion around your brand. And who are your best brand ambassadors? Your own employees. They need to be your super brand ambassadors, because if they talk about how great you are and why someone should want to engage with you, then they are that first tier of champions. And then they tell family and friends, and now you have external champions. And they tell family and friends, and you see how you build a network of champions to support your brand, increase your revenue, and be a mitigation for risk. Because someday there's going to be a crisis, and you need those champions to rally around you. But if you're recruiting these champions, you got to give them tools to be successful, right? So I want you to write this down. Every business needs to have a 30-second elevator speech. Every business, not-for-profit, for-profit, whether you're an academic institution, whether you're a student that's about to move into a great career, you need to know what the elevator speech is. That's 30 seconds of who you are and why should I care. Why? That's the important part. The next thing, you need to have a 20-second infomercial. So I travel a lot, 4 days a week, because I'm in a different hotel most nights. I lay awake in a bed, I'm watching television. I know every exercise equipment for sale in America because they are doing infomercials at 2 a.m. because they are impactful. So what is your company's infomercial? It's 20 seconds. 20 seconds of why are you passionately believing in this company. Tell me why you are so excited about the quality, so excited about the culture. And I want it as a video. And I want those videos on your website. Because nowadays, we know that people no longer want to spend a lot of time reading. They want to watch something. They want to be entertained. You got to be able to tell them why, and then you need to visually be able to tell them why with that passion. And here's the third thing. You need to have the best website that you can possibly have to be a successful business. It needs to be mobile friendly, because let me tell you, nobody's using their computer to check out your company anymore. They're using their phone, right? We have students who don't even own a computer anymore. They do all their work on their cell phone. But your website needs to be where every marketing activity is driven to, so that it's a one-stop shop to find out about you. And on your website, it doesn't need to be loaded down with lots of information. It needs to tell why. Because people are checking you out, whether you're applying for a job, whether you're investigating, wanting to hire a lawn service, or whether they're thinking about looking at you as an academic institution to further their education. Your website needs to be where all marketing is driven to, and it needs to be mobile friendly. You know, have you all noticed that in the last 18 months, the environment seems to have changed a little? If any of you have been on Facebook, you might have noticed the tone that's being used. We have people who think there is fake news, real news, whatever kind of news. We have people who are on the left and the right and whatever, and all of them are shooting arrows at the other ones. The environment has changed. And what we all need to think about, and if you will write this quote down, this is the one message I want you to take away with this evening. We no longer do digital marketing. We no longer do digital marketing. We do marketing in a digital world. And let me give you a couple examples. Do you know that they estimate now that 70%, as much as 70% of all consumers have purchased their items based on content they read on Facebook? Whether they're looking at opening an account at a bank or whether they're thinking about buying a pair of shoes. 70% have researched you on Facebook. So if you are not in the social media game, you have assets left out on the table. And for all our young students in here, that was life before Facebook. It was dull and boring, I admit, but we have all joined you into that world. Thank you for driving us into the 21st century. Here's the second point for those of you that perhaps are in public relations or media relations. My company did a survey about a year and a half ago of the Capitol Press Corps. So the media that's in a capital city, mostly interested in public policy taking place during legislative session, but Capitol Press Corps in the 10 largest states. And we asked them a series of questions, but this is what I found most interesting. Capitol Press Corps said 80% of the time they decide what story they're going to write, or they round out their story based on what they read on Twitter. So for those of us that grew up with sending out press releases through the fax machine, no longer in the realm of possibility. Media now are so overworked and understand so many priorities, they are looking at social media. If you're trying to promote your business and you're not on Twitter, huge asset left on the table. Let me give you one more. For those of you that might be interested someday in dealing with our members of Congress, they now say a member of Congress, this was a survey that came out almost 2 years ago now, so I'm sure it's even more dramatic, that as little as 10 tweets determines if that member of Congress thinks that issue is important, and as few as 30 tweets might sway their opinion. So for those of us that are interested in how laws affect us and how laws are made and who should influence that, the old paradigm of having 1,000 people go to Washington for this great fly-in, now that will always be valuable, always. But if you're not layering that with social media, you're missing out. And frankly, your competition is taking advantage of it, and you need to also. So I have something called the rule of 3. It's Karen's rule of 3. So I want you to remember 3, and this is how you do it. How many little pigs were about to have their house blown down? Yes, 3. How many bears did Goldilocks deal with? Yes, exactly. How many wishes did the fairy give? Right. How many musketeers are there? 3 people. Remember 3. Okay? 3, 3, 3. Here's Karen's rule of 3. And it would be awesome if you wrote down Karen's rules of 3. First one. You need 3 facts about your business. 3 facts. Facts are always numbers. Facts are numbers. But don't overwhelm me with numbers. Have you ever met a person who was so excited to share their information, it became this white noise of facts and figures and formulas and whatever? A person, there's been a lot of research on this, a person can make a decision based on just 3 numbers, 3 facts, whatever the best facts are that support your business. And what I want is every single person in your company uses the same 3 facts, and so there's continuity and consistency across the board. How many facts should be on your website? Right. I want 3 stories. 3 stories. See, what people want is they want to have an emotional connection with you. Your champions are your champions because they feel they have a relationship. And you get a relationship based on having an interest and a story. That's what people tell. So I'm going to give you a true story. It's not about promoting a business. This actually is a story about influencing a bill. I was out in a Midwestern state, and I was there with a group of advocates that were trying to get dollars set aside for mental health support. And the promoter of the bill, we were going to be in his office to brief him before that great committee meeting. And we're looking at the time and looking at the time. And all of a sudden, at the last minute, this member runs in and says, "I'm sorry, I have no time to talk to you." And I said, "But sir, really, we want to talk to you before the bill gets heard at the committee." And he said, "Well, if you want to walk with me." So I'm walking from the office to the committee room, and I said, "Sir, let me tell you how important your bill is. Let me tell you about Gary. Let me tell you about what your bill will do for Gary." So we're walking, and finally we stop, and he says, "Thank you," closes the door. I'm like, "Well, I don't know." So I go into the back of this room. There's a huge crowd. The members of the House were sitting up front. The Speaker, the head of the committee, bangs the gavel down, and he said, "Now we're going to talk about House Bill 121. But before we do, I want to tell you about my best friend, Gary." And proceeds to give my exact story, which, by the way, I made up. But the point I want for you all to remember is, if I had been running along saying, "Let me tell you, this is going to affect 1.2 million people, and the cost is going to be this and that, and you need to understand the economic implications of this and the trickle-down effect." So, no. I told him about Gary. What people want are stories. And every single one of you have a great story about what your company has done for someone. What your company has received when they got a loan and invested in them. What your company has done when they've made them more profitable. And the proud effect that takes place, both by the person that helped them and the one receiving it. I want stories, 3 of them, and I want them on your website, and I want them video. 3 of them on your website in video. I also want you in the 21st century. You need to be on 3 social media platforms at all times. And when I say be on them, what I mean is actively engaged in them. For those people who say, I have Facebook, and then I open it up and I see the post was in 2004, I don't think that's active on social media. So, what you want is that your brand ambassadors have those things. They've got the facts, they've got the stories, they're active on the platforms, they're driving traffic to the website, and that culmination creates your champions, and your champions are the ones helping you sell your product and service. So, what's the vehicle that a lot of champions use? And that's social media, because it's very personal and it's very inexpensive, right? So, as a business leader, I want you to know that I recognize that what is seen in the media can be true or not, and it doesn't matter because there's a lot of research by some people that believe anything on the internet is gospel and absolutely correct, and we know that that probably isn't true, but that gives you an opportunity and a challenge, and if you're not in the game protecting your brand, then your competition's edging you out of the marketplace. Just as I told you earlier that the number one fear in America is public speaking, the number one fear now for CEOs, this research came out fairly recently, the number one fear of CEOs now is social media affecting the brand, a social media blunder affecting the brand. Let me give you an example of that, and then I'm going to give you a good example. True story. This wasn't that long ago. Justine Seiko was the Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications for IAC. Do you all know that company? It's a major media conglomerate. They own a bunch of brands. They own like Match.com, they own Tinder, they own Ask.com, they own lots of brands. Okay, so Justine is going on vacation for Christmas, and she is in London, and she's going to Johannesburg, and she gets on the plane, and she tweets out, going to Africa. Hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white. Proceeds to take a sleeping pill because the flight from London to Johannesburg is 14 hours. During the 14 hours of her tweet, hour 3, it was number 1 trending on Twitter. At one point, I loved this tweet, all I want for Christmas is to see Justine's face when she lands in Johannesburg. Hour 6 of her long flight, IAC stock was down as much as 8%. Hour 7 of the flight, IAC tweeted to her that she was fired. Hour 11, when she lands and wakes up, turns her phone on and reads, OMG, what happened? She realized the power of social media. And this is not a woman that I would say had huge followings. But what happened is those that followed her tweeted it out, to tweet it out, to tweet it out. Social media is a huge challenge, not done right. But let me give you a good story. So, Southwest Airlines, one of their flights is stranded on the tarmac at hour 2 on the tarmac. The people on the plane now have gotten over the fact that they are stranded. And the flight attendant is walking up and down the aisle trying to do whatever she can. And she gets to the back of the plane, and there is a woman crying. And she walks up and she says, ma'am, what is it? What can I do to help you? And she said, because of you and Southwest Airlines, I am missing my son's wedding. And the flight attendant said, I am so sorry, ma'am. And she walks to the front of the plane and she grabs the mic and she says, ladies and gentlemen, Because we are grounded, there is a woman on this plane who's going to miss her son's wedding, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand out napkins and pens, and I want all of you to write a congratulatory note to the happy couple, and I want you to give them a marriage advice or not. Within 10 minutes, you saw a completely different environment. People were saying, oh, this is what I wrote. Oh, I got divorced. This is what I wrote. People were sharing all sorts of information. And the woman was watching this around her. And when the plane finally did get off and landed, as she is walking to the front of the plane, she actually collected what I heard was $187 for her to buy a gift to the couple on behalf of the people of the plane. Now, why am I telling you this story? The reason is because later that day, the flight attendant puts on her Facebook page, Southwest Airlines has the greatest passengers in the world. Let me tell you about this cool event. 2 days later, after the wedding ceremony is over and the festivities are done, the woman puts on her Facebook page and tweets out, the greatest airline in the world is Southwest Airlines, and I will never fly another airline but that. Let me tell you what happened. And within 24 hours of those going out to more and more and more people, Southwest Airlines had the highest number of ticket sales for one day than they had had all year. Now, Southwest didn't put up a discount buy. Southwest didn't buy an ad. Southwest had champions talking about how great they were, and that drove ticket sales, which is revenue for an airline. That's what I want all of you to think about. How do you get people to tell a story to their friends and family about something positive that they can then tell to friends and family? And that will drive sales. And frankly, for you students, that would drive employment, because what an employee knows is for those of you that are engaged and know how to talk and share stories are the kind of people you want in your corporate culture. And so that's the kind of people that you should hire. So I've told you that you need to be on 3 social media platforms. Let me quickly go over that for you. You need to think about what platform is best for your target audience. Believe me, somebody on Snapchat may not be the same person on Pinterest. You gotta be on at least 3 platforms so that your stakeholders are touched by at least 1, 2, or 3 of those. So whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or LinkedIn or Pinterest or Google or Reddit, or the list goes on and on, I've been told that 1,000 apps are created every month. Heaven knows what the next one's gonna be in a few weeks, but we'll see. What I want you to think about is that if Facebook is one of the platforms you need to think about, then you need to actively engage on Facebook. Now, it depends on what your resources and your bandwidth is and who your target audience is. So giving specifics is inappropriate, but I'm going to give you a recommendation, and then you need to do what's best for your business, right? But Facebook, you should probably think about posting that at least 3 or 4 times a week. Posting once a month on Facebook about your company, and I want you to remember there's a huge firewall. There's personal Facebook and there's your company corporate Facebook, and that firewall is so strong it is impenetrable. But you need to post on that. If you're going to be using Twitter, you need to think that the shelf life of Twitter is 7 minutes. So for those of you that said, well, I tweeted out this morning, I can say to you, yeah, well, 20 minutes later, nobody's looking at it. So Twitter, you need to think about at least 3 to 4 times a day, and you need to think about Twitter at least 5 days a week. And it's okay to retweet the same thing, because 14 minutes ago is a lifetime and no one will remember you tweeted it out. And the other thing about Facebook and Twitter is liking and retweeting, etc., is that you don't have to have original content yourself. I love when somebody else writes a great article and I retweet what they did, or I like the picture that they've created, or I share their story. As a Chamber of Commerce person, I want every business to do well. So any business in my community, and I use community in the broadest sense of the word, community is the nation, not just Tallahassee, Florida. I want to share those stories of businesses that do well, and you need to think about that too. The other thing is they now say that 60% of the reputation of a company is based on the reputation of the CEO. The CEO represents the company. I have 48 employees, but I know that when I walk into Publix or my employee walks into Publix, they better be seeing the brand of Moore Communications Group, because you walk and talk and live and breathe and reflect the brand. But the best thing for a CEO to do is blog, because people want to hear from CEOs. Every CEO should at least once a month do a blog. And a blog can be 500 words. But what you want is to become a thought leader. Let people hear your advice. And people are very interested and appreciative of it, and probably want to come back and support your brand because they learned something from you. So let me close with one last story for you, and then I'm happy to take questions. This is a true story. It's my story. So 25 years ago, I was working at Florida State University as the Director of Marketing Public Relations. I had the world's greatest job. And I had an epiphany one day. If I was ever going to do anything different, I needed to take the leap and go do it. So I walked in that day to the president and said, Mr. President, I'm giving you 3 months' notice, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to start my own company. He looked at me and he said, really? I said, yes, sir. He said, have you ever worked in a company? No, sir. Have you ever hired a public relations firm? No, sir. You've never worked in a public relations firm? No, sir. He said, then what do you think? I said, I got passion. The day I walked out, 3 months later, this is how much my passion had. I had no office, no computer, no phone, no business plan, no marketing plan, no money, and a 7-month-old. And within 1 week, I had 5 clients. And today, almost 25 years later, as referenced by the dean, we're one of the fastest growing businesses in America, and we are named as one of the best places to work for in the state of Florida, and in the public relations arena, the best place to work for a PR firm in the nation. And why I am so proud of that is you can be fast growing and a great place to work at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have it all. So, on that very first day, I had a chair, and I sat in my chair, and I wrote down, okay, Karen, you've left the world's greatest job. You better be making the next world's greatest job. So I wrote down, these are the 3 things that will be the hallmark of your company. And 24 years later, they are the basis of the pillars of this company. The first one is, you will do the right thing. And I wrote that down. Do the right thing. You know, even when it's hard, even when your competitors don't, even when it costs you something, do the right thing. Just do the right thing. In a culture where it's all questioned, if you always just do the right thing, then you're always seen as being really good, ethical business leader. Do the right thing. The second thing I wrote down is be innovative, because I believe that if you are not moving forward, it's not that you're standing still, you're actually moving behind. You're either forward or behind. You've got to be innovative at all times. Every single day I wake up and say, what is it new, different that we need to be doing to be better? What can we do new and different for our clients to make them better? Be innovative. And the third thing I wrote down is you and everybody else needs to talk about how good and innovative you are. That's what advocacy is. Letting people know about who you are, what you do, why should they care, and then get all of them to promote you and your brand. Thank you very much.